So for the table, it is also possible to have table inside the table. So table inside table means nested table. So the table data or the cells, which is TD, it can contain nested tables. So tables within tables. For example, I have a table and then I have TR. TR is the row. And then I have TD. TD is the first column in the table. And then the second column, TD, the second column, I want to create another table. So this table is inside in the TD. So this table contains of one row and two columns, first name and last name. Okay, so you can have tables within tables. So let's see how we can show the result. This is what we call as nested tables. Okay, so this is a nested table. Maybe it is not clear about how the nested table works, but if you see from the code, there is one table. This is one table. Maybe I can make this one more clear. Let's say border equals to 2. Okay, if the border equals to 2, so you can see there is one border to indicate one table, and then there is one row, and then the first column is the contact, and the second column, it is one table. So in this table, we have one row, and this one row includes two columns, first name and last name. So this is possible to make many tables inside the tables. In the tables, there are two important attributes. We call it cell spacing and cell padding. Cell spacing. Cell spacing means we can define the empty space between the cell. So if we have the cell, so we have the empty space here. We have the empty space. So what is the empty space between the cell? Cell padding, on the other hand, it is about the empty space around the cell content. So if we have one cell, so how big is the empty space from the text into the left or the right or the top or the bottom of the cell? So this is what we call as cell padding. Now let's see. Table cells.html. So if you look at the result, for the first table, we have the cell spacing, which is 15. So what is cell spacing? It is the space between the cell. So I want to have the cell spacing is 15 and the cell padding is 0. Cell padding means the space from the text into the border of the cell. You can see here, the cell padding is 0, but the cell spacing is 15. So there are some space outside. But the second one here is the cell spacing is 0 and the cell padding is 10. So from the text into the border, there are some space. So that's the difference between cell spacing and cell padding. Okay, so this is the result. Now, in the table, there are also some other possibility to make the span. So what is the span? Because this is the column span and row span. So if it is a column span, means the column can be integrated or the column can be merged. So it defines how many columns the cell occupies. So in this case, if there are two cells or if there are two columns, so we can separate into cell 1,1 and cell 1,2. But the second row, it contains only one cell and it occupies two different cells. So for the row span, we have two rows actually. But this first cell, it defines how many rows that the cell occupies. So it defines how many rows the cell occupies. So this cell occupies two rows. This cell occupies two columns. Okay. So that's the definition of the column span and row span. If the column span is 1, then yeah, this one, this one, this one. But if the column span is 2, it means I have two columns for one cell. Now let's see the example. This column span 1, and this is column span 2. Because two cells become 1. This is row span 2, because two rows in one cell. Row span 1, row span 1. Now let's see the example. Okay, now let's see. In this table, the cell spacing is 0. So because we want to see only how the column span and the row span works. In this row, this is one row. The class equals to 1. So yeah, the class is just to indicate that this is the first row. Now we have the TD. Maybe if it is too complex for you to read, you can make it a better layout. For example, like this one. So we have TD, and then the first TD is cell 1,1, and the second TD is the column span equals to 2, and the cell is 2, 1. Now the second row, we have first TD, second TD, and the third TD. And the third row, we have TD, TD, and finish. Okay, so I think this format will be much better to see. The first row here, it contains TD. This is cell 1, 1, and then the second TD, it is the combination of two columns. How can we know this is two columns? Because we have column span equals to 2. So the columns, actually, they are two columns, but I want to make it as one column. Cell 2, 1, it is two columns. Okay, so this is two columns. Now, I go to the next row. On the next row, we have cell 1, 2. Okay, this is the first cell. What about the second cell? The second cell, I define row span 2. Row span 2 means in one cell there are two rows. So this is cell 2, 2. And then the last cell is 3, 2. What about the last row? The last row, this one. The cell 1, 3, it is the first cell. And then I need only to define the last cell, which is cell 2, 2. Okay. Now, why this only have 2 TD, this only have 2 TD, but this has 3 TD? Why? So TD means the cell. So if we have 3 TD, it means we have 3 cells. If we have 3 cells, means we have 3 columns. Okay. Now we have 3 TR. It means we have 3 rows. Okay. So actually, the original table is like this one. We have 3 rows and we have 3 columns. However, we want to merge the column in the first row. So we merge this one with the column span 2. And then we merge the second row and the second column. So we merge this one. Okay, so that's why it becomes the column span 2 in this case, and the row span 2 in this case. So the TD will remain only the numbers of cell belongs to that particular row. So in the row 1, the cell only have 1 and 2. For the second row, the cell only have 1, 2, 3, because now we need to define at the first time. What about the third row? The third row, we have only the cell, this one and this one. What about this? Yeah, we don't need to define this one because it is already defined as the row span in the previous row. Okay, so yeah, you need to understand how to create the row span and the column span. If you already define the column span at the first part, then you don't need to have another TD. You don't have to put another TD for the next of this row. This one we have TD, TD, TD. Okay? So we have TD, TD, and TD. Because we already say that this row will be a row span of 2. Then we don't need to have another TD here. So we don't need to specify the TD in the third row. So that's the meaning why it has only 2 TD. It has only 2 TD, but we have 3 TD here. Okay, so this is to clearly show with the color. You can see how the cell is merged. The first cell is merged into columns and this is merged in the row wise. The next section is about the forms. Forms is important when you create data. You will need to get some data from users, and some of the data should be in the form. So entering the user data from a web page can be for anything. For example, you can insert the login user, or you need to get the name from the users, or anything related to the user details information. So there are many ways to design the form, but this is the basic way. It depends on how you will use the HTML. Let me just start with the very basic using the HTML forms. So forms are the primary method for gathering data from site visitors. And you can create a form block with form, this one. So for example, I can do form as the beginning of the HTML and then form as the ending. And then I can define what is the name, what is the method, and what are the actions. The method attribute tells how the form data should be sent. Now, it is too early to mention about this one, but in the maybe after 3 or 4 weeks, you will see more how we can define this one, whether it is using get or push. Action means the attribute tells where the form data should be sent. So we can send to one HTML file, or we can send to, for example, the backend, or for example, we can send to the JavaScript and so on. So it is about the file that we want to connect for the data sending. So in the form, there are some fields. Fields means attributes. If we want to get the attributes in single line, for example, I want to get the username, okay, then I can use input. So the input means I want to get from the user, and the type is a text. It means you can type anything, A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, because it is a text. The name. So this is the name of this attribute. So if you input anything, then it will have the attribute name is first name. The value is just the initial value. Before the user input, there should be something to indicate that this is a form to get the name of the user. Text area. Text area, it is a multi-line. It means you can type as long as possible. And the text will be not only one line. It can be 2 lines, 3 lines, 4 lines, 5 lines, and so on. Usually this is a kind of comments. So if you post in the social media like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, you can type as many as you want. So usually the form will be in the text area. Hidden fields. Hidden fields, it means we have some attribute that will not be shown in the HTML. So this hidden, sometimes it can be like the password, or sometimes it can be the account ID that the people cannot understand it, but the HTML know that you are now in the web. Reset means this brings the form into its initial state. So when you have this reset input, whenever you click the button, then everything will disappear and it will go to the initial value. So every value here, this is the initial value. Here you have the value, this is the initial value. Value, this is the initial value. Okay, let's see one simple example of the input. Okay, note that this is still not working because there is no database. You cannot connect to database, we cannot save the data. So this is only a form. Okay, so yeah, I can input any name, for example, Bernardo, and then let's say Nugroho. Okay, and then yeah, I can reset the form. If I reset the form, then it will be deleted. So the head title, I guess you already know. The head title is text input control, and then we have the form. Form here. The first part is first name, and then the input type is text. So it means I can input anything. And the name is first name, so this is the attribute of the first name. So later on, if you need to call this value, then you can just make the attribute name as the variable. Okay. So you can put also the value here. For example, value, write your name. Okay. Then with the value, you can see this is the initial value. Okay. So with this initial value, people know that, okay, I need to write my name here. But basically, this is just an initial value. You don't need to specify this one as well. Let's say I change to Bernardo. Okay, then if I reset the form, then it will go back to the initial value. Now let's check what is the text area. form text area. So in the text area, we have the form, okay, and then text area, we can define how many rows do we want to define and how many columns do we specify. In this case, I have 5 rows and 50 columns. So it means 50 texts in the box. So you can see here, enter description here. So it is, yeah, there is a text here. Let's say I want to type something here. This is about the class of information system development. We learn about HTML and other stuff. Okay. So you can see now there are 2 lines. You can write until 5 rows. I hope that everybody can do well in this course. Good luck for your study in this semester and so on. So you can see there are 5 rows. And then in these 5 rows, there are 50 columns or 50 characters. Okay. So you can limit this and you can define by yourself. If I reset the form, then it will go back to the original text. The original text is the enter description here. So the input will be type of reset, and then it will be a button. Field set. So field set means I have a input and I want to put it as a set. I want to put it as a set. For example, I know that username or maybe the customer name, it is a set of customer database. And then I have another set, for example, the order. So maybe the customers would like to order some products. So it will be in the different database. Maybe it is in the product database. Then the set of the field will be different. The field set of the customer name or the client's name will be in the first set. The second set will be for the product details. Okay, so we call it the field sets. So field sets are used to enclose a group of related form fields. So now it is not working with action. So just let's try. Let's see. Okay. So if you see this one, this is the first input set. The first input set, it will be in a block. So this will belong to the client detail. And then the second input set, this will be according to the order details. So we can specify with this form. So the first field set is the client details. So the legend means the definition of the field set. And the other field set is about the order details. So the legend means the explanation of that field set. Client details and order details. So you can specify in this text. The other is only about the input, which is the type of text, and then it is also another input, which the type is text, and so on. Okay, so this input, the type is text, and this is the text area. The column is 40 and the row is 10. So there are kind of variation when you want to use the forms. For example, you can use the checkbox, you can use the radio button. Okay. If you join the computer programming, I think in the computer programming, you also design some form. Okay. So in the form, you can see some checkbox, radio button. And in the radio button, you will see kind of options. So if it is a radio button, you can choose only one among the button. Or checkbox, you can choose multiple checkbox. It means you can choose more than one. So radio buttons can be grouped, allowing only one to be selected from the group. For checkbox, it can be more than one. Okay. So let's see with this example. So this is checkbox, and then this is radio button. So in the radio button, you can choose only one. So you cannot choose both. Okay. So the name is, it does not appear here because we don't specify something. The radio button is the city, Seoul, and Busan. If you want to see, you can see it's Seoul and let's say Busan. Okay. Okay, so you can see here this option. If you select Seoul, then you cannot select Busan. Only one option is available. For the fruit, let's say you want to say apple. Okay. Let's say banana, and then grape, for example, and then you want to change this one into banana, and then you want to change the value to grape. Okay, and maybe this is fruit. Okay, let's see. Okay, so you can select all the things at the same time for the fruit, but for the Seoul and Busan, you cannot select both of them. You need to select one. So you need to put all the things into the same name. Okay, in this case, you put the name city. You put the name as fruit. So later on, I will know that you select 3 different fruits. In this case, because it is a radio button, then I know that you need to select only one city. Okay. So the other form controls, it is the drop-down menus. So in the drop-down menus, you can select using some options. So let's see. Just let me put here. Okay, so I have the select name is gender, and then the option value, okay, male is the first selection. The second one is female, and the other is other. Maybe the person do not want to disclose their gender. So I can select other, I can select female, I can select male. But when I refresh, it will be always at the first option. The selected is male. It means whenever I reset or if I refresh, then the first will appear or male will appear. So you can change this default For example, I want to have the selected as the third one. Value is number 3. So you can change the selected here. So whenever you refresh, now the first will become other because this is the selected, or this is the initial value for the drop down. So you can see we need to use the option. Okay? Option to define the drop down menu. There are still remaining parts that I need to explain, but I think the time is limited. Let me stop here, okay? Because maybe some of you have other class.